So welcome everyone. Behavioural insights drive and influence many aspects of policies, programs, and decision-making across a range of contexts. The term is often referred to as efforts made to gain an accurate and evidence-based understanding of how people behave and make decisions. These insights are crucial in planning, designing, and implementing many policies and programs on the basis of these deeper understandings. It also increases their impact. Behavioural economics is just one of the many disciplines, such as social marketing or psychology, that apply and investigate behavioural insights. Behavioural economics combines elements of economics and psychology to understand how and why people behave the way they do in the real world. It differs from classical economics, which assumes that most people have well-defined preferences, make well-informed, self-interested decisions based on those preferences. Our very special guest today is Natasha Doherty, who is a perfect example of someone applying behavioural insights in action. Natasha is the managing director within the strategy practice with Accenture, with more than 20 years experience in program and policy evaluation. Her interests and passions lay in using evidence-based research to inform future policy directions of acute health services, primary health, and mental health services. Natasha's work with government and non-profit clients to inform evidence-based practice and policy to enhance the quality of life for all Australians. It is my pleasure to welcome Natasha. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So I guess I'll just get started. What led you to a career in economics, and in particular sort of economics which applies behavioural insights?
Yeah, so I didn't sort of classically start in the economics field in terms of my areas of study. I started off actually doing management, a bachelor's of management, and also was specialising in travel and tourism as part of that degree. As part of doing that degree, one of the courses that you had to do was Econ 101. And I went to that course not really knowing much about what economics was about or how it might influence our lives. And I quickly came to realise how important economics was and the way economics was applied to policy decisions, investment decisions, the reliance that government had on some of the insights that economics would bring, that it had such a large influence on people's day-to-day lives and the sorts of policies that would get up and be implemented versus those things that may not be implemented or may not lead to changes in the way that we drive policy outcomes across Australia or globally. And so it just ignited this real fire in me around how I realised that economics could really make a big difference in people's lives. And so, yeah, that led me to change to a specialisation in economics, and then later on to specialise in the area of health economics through a master's. So, yeah, that was my my foray into the economics field. In terms of behavioural insights, it's something that I was always interested in from an early stage of my career, being exposed to things like evolutionary economics, which has a behavioural element to it and starts to challenge some of those traditional paradigms that exist within the economics field and really starts to push some of those boundaries. So that was one of my first forays into the behavioural insights element that could be applied with an economics lens. And I can see with a lot of the work that I've done since I've finished my undergraduate and my postgraduate studies, how we need to use a lot more real and empirical, evidence from the influence that policy has and the way people react to policy or program investment to really better customize some of our responses and really, get to the crux of what the issues are to incentivize behaviors or, lead to more preferential outcomes in terms of what we're trying to achieve. So that's just sort of like, it started with with evolutionary economics, and then it's sort of just as I've gone on my career journey, I've started to realize more intensely, how important it is to base our decision making in real world data and real world evidence to support the sorts of recommendations we might be making in whatever area it is that we're focused on. So yeah, that's how I got involved in economics.
Yeah, and I guess sort of on that as well, with your career path, could you sort of give us an insight into what your career path was, sort of where you've come from and where you're heading now that you're with Accenture?
Yeah. So I started my career in federal government. So worked with the ABS for a number of years on a lot of the labour market statistics and some of the large-scale health-related statistics as well. So private health establishments and a raft of different things there, including working on the census and births, deaths, and marriages. So really good grounding that I got there around understanding the importance of data to inform decision making, and how some of the larger and more significant data sets that we collect as a nation are collected and analysed to inform policy decisions. And then I moved out of there and moved into state government. I did lots of different things in state government, but working on things like the smart state strategy with the chief scientist at the time, who was Peter Andrews, was a fantastic opportunity to get some of that strategic thinking that he really brought to the role that he had there as part of the chief scientist. Worked on some climate change policy, industry policy development, and decided to go back into my specialisation that I wanted to work in, which was health. So worked in the Department of Health in the data and statistics unit there. Again, data being the central element of what I was looking at to provide insights around quality of care and access and all of those sorts of things. And also did some workforce research there as well around optimizing models of utilizing the workforce within the health sector from a public health perspective. Then I moved over to Deloitte Access Economics. I was there for 11 years. It was a fantastic place to ground my consulting skills, and have done lots of work there around policy and program evaluation, social impact assessments, cost of illness studies, anything in and around that health and social policy field, which helps to influence the way policy is implemented and used within investment decisions made by government, but also supporting non-profits to better understand the impact that they're having as organisations, and for them to set their strategic direction as well. And now I'm over at Accenture, and I'm really excited about the opportunity that we have here. Over the last, 2.5 years of COVID, we've seen the importance that technology has played on everything in our lives to support us to continue to work, to support us to continue to be able to access, healthcare. The importance that it's had on the ability for governments to track progress around vaccinations and COVID outbreaks, and there's just so many ways in which technology really has been elevated in terms of the role it plays in society more generally, but in particular in the space in which I work in healthcare. So I'm super excited to be joining up in the Accenture team with some really deep experts within the technology field to bring the intersect of where data plays along technology, plays along policy to support, achieving better outcomes across the health and social policy sector. So, really, really excited about what will be coming next for the team that we're building here.
Well, yeah, and you've kind of alluded to it from where you are to where you are now as to, I read an interesting article from Bloomberg News, and they predicted that the top jobs for the next 10 years would include behavioural scientists and data analysts. And I guess I was interested in seeing why you think there's an increasing demand for this, but it's very well explained, I think, by your career and the work you've done, and especially, like you said, with COVID, there's definitely a need for these researchers and this real use of data to influence the future of where we go from here. I just wanted to see if your thoughts on this as well.
Absolutely. I think there's a really deep recognition that we need to better observe the behavioural impacts that policy and investment has to better understand how we might shape policy interventions to deliver better outcomes. The increasing availability of data really strengthens our opportunity that we have to observe real behavioural outcomes and gather more empirical evidence to support the assessments that we make around what policy is working and what things need to change. And so, as you said, Sam, like the amount of data that we now have in this world really supports that increasing need that we're going to have on data analysts to make sense of that data and organize that data in a structured way. And then the link that has with behavioral scientists that can then use their skills to explore those issues that the data exposes and then understand and translate that into policy and investment decisions based on those observed outcomes. So more and more I see, the importance of that role of data scientists, that data sort of analysts, play alongside those behavioural scientists to really bring those insights to support better policy investments. And even in our work, we work very closely along the data scientists and the data analysts and engineers and lots of different skill sets to really bring a holistic picture around, how we approach the complex problems that we have as a society that we need to address.
Yeah, and I think we definitely reflect that here as well. We definitely recognize the need for diversity in skill sets, diversity in knowledge, and bringing those all together to really make the most of this data for behavioral insights. I guess moving sort of towards, your career, your observation about careers in economics. What job skills do you see people will need in the future entering a career like this?
Yeah, so it may not necessarily be the answer you expect, but it sort of dovetails out of what we were just talking about before. But I actually think that the most important thing for economists and others influencing policy in the future is to be open to other perspectives and other ways of seeing the world. I think increasingly we need a multiplicity of different perspectives to really understand the issues that we face as a society and to really get that holistic response that's needed to be more successful in what it is that we take forward to address these complex issues. So to really do that well, we need to be open to those ideas and those other perspectives and be able to sort of put away our own thinking and be open-minded to listening to what others have to say and the viewpoints that they bring. And melding together the different disciplines that we have to come up with the right answer. And that can sometimes be hard for economists to do. We're a little bit wedded in our ways of thinking. I think, I see it done much better in some of the younger economists coming forward. I think there is an impetus to think differently and to take on sort of different perspectives. So I have lots of hope for that in terms of, how we can bring a multitude of views to solve these complex issues in the future.
And I guess also for new students entering this space and even behavioral economics, so what do you see as sort of the applications of the discipline? Because I guess from a university perspective, we often focus on theory and method, and especially when we're teaching, new students how to become great economists and behavioral economists, it's also important to see the real world applications. And I was wondering what you see as, the biggest applications of the discipline.
There are so many, and there's so many things that you can talk about. It's not really limiting in terms of its application. I don't see there being a real limit to the way that you can use behavioral insights. You can use it in small scale investments, like, so for instance, let's say a community center that you might implement where you're trying to deliver services that meet the needs of that community. So, if you were able to collect data and information around the way people utilize those services, the frequency in which they interact with the different services that are available at that centre, maybe then how that then influences or dovetails into their social connections that they have. That sort of data provides you with really real and tangible insights around how people express the need that they have through the way that they're utilising the services in that centre, right? So that's just one really, really, that could be in a micro level in terms of that sort of analysis. And then you can go to a macro level. So, one of the areas where we've applied behavioural insights previously is around better understanding how people utilise and interact with the National Bowel Cancer Screening Program. So what are some of the barriers to participation in that program? Why is it that people don't participate? Why is it at certain points they might opt out of the process? Are there other influencing factors based on their geography or their other demographic factors, or are there other more behavioural elements that are really underpinning that limit or mean there are barriers in place to their participation that can be better supported or overcome through either the information that's provided, the sorts of things that are included in the test kit, those sort of really practical things where you can have a small cost but a really large impact in terms of people's participation, and therefore the longer term benefits of sort of applying those behavioural insights to something like the National Bowel Cancer Screening Program can result in huge economic and social benefits in terms of the avoided future cost of late stage cancer identification, participation in the workforce as a result of that, quality of life indicators for those individuals, and ultimately avoiding death or early death. And so, there are small scale ways of using behavioural insights, and there are, large scale implications that I think where it can be applied. But they're two sort of like on the spectrum examples of where I've seen behavioural insights really come into its own.
Yeah, and I guess it's very true. There are so many broad applications for behavioral economics, and it can go in so many different directions. And I guess you personally, now that you've had quite an established career in this space, have had a lot of experiences with the small and the larger scale impacts of these. I guess I was also interested in knowing what your biggest successes and challenges were in this field and in this career, what you sort of have, even the benefits and limitations of the economics itself. It's sort of I guess a twofold question, but I'm just curious in that space as well.
Yeah. Look, I think this is a question that I struggled with the most, I think. And I look, there's a few challenges. Like sometimes, if I think specifically in the behavioural field, sometimes it's difficult to convince people that it's worthwhile, to invest the time and to collect the data and to sort of analyze the real world insights that you get by understanding the underlying behavioural elements that might be influencing the impact or outcomes that you're observing as part of whatever it is that you're looking at. Sometimes there's some perceptions around, cost, time, other elements like that. And so, there's a lot of trying to, at times, convince people of the value of investing in these sorts of insights to support what is, in my mind, like avoided costs later on down the road, because you can make better decisions around what to do to improve the long-term outcomes that you desire as part of the intervention. What is my greatest success as an economist? I couldn't pinpoint on any one thing, but where I get really excited and I get really proud of the sorts of things I do is where I see practically how I've been able to support a client to make a decision, and you can actually observe, the change that's occurring, and that it has made a difference in terms of the outcomes that you're seeing, or the direction that they're heading in regards to the investment decisions they're making, or how the policy is really making a difference in the lives of those that it's meant to. So that's where I get really excited, when you can observe how, what you've done or what you've been part of has really made a difference.
Yeah, and that is such an exciting part about this career as well. And I think a lot of economists that I've spoken to have said that as well, is the biggest satisfaction of seeing the impact that their research has had in the real world as well.
Yeah.
And I guess we work with a diverse range of economists and behavioral science practitioners from different genders, ethnicities, disciplines. We often see, I guess, dominant perspectives in all of these positions. And I was curious to see how you see diversity of practitioners themselves helping or maybe even hindering the field, and what your perspectives on, increased diversity in this space would be, and what it could do for the discipline.
Yeah, I think just like when I spoke about taking diversity of perspectives in terms of disciplines, I think it goes the same way if we go intradisciplinary. We have to have diversity of perspectives within the disciplines that we're operating. I think we do have, diversity issues in the area of economics, and we have to keep working at that and improving it. That's a responsibility of all of us as economists or behavioural scientists, to ensure that we're supporting people of different genders, ethnicities, sexual orientation, every type of diversity element you can think of, because without that, we can't challenge the thinking. You get, a convergence of ideas that self-support each other to go in one direction, which may not necessarily bring the perspectives of and experiences of others that are different to those that are sort of dominating those fields. So just like we need to think about multidisciplinary perspectives, we also need to think about the difference of perspective that people bring from the experiences they've had in their lives, and their gender and ethnicity. Like I said, like all of those things need to be thought about in terms of the diversity lens we put on the policy issues that we're trying to face.
Yeah, I think that's definitely important for a wide variety of projects as well. I think having that different, experience behind you as well when you're going into these spaces can really help to, I guess, build that relationship with the client as well, like you say, and really help them understand that, you've got a better understanding of the problem as well in many situations, I would say. I guess moving on from that, and you've clearly had a lot of different experiences in this space yourself. I was curious as to who inspires you as an economist as well.
Yeah. I haven't picked one person, Sam, so I haven't sort of said, oh, this one person inspires me. There's so many great people that contribute to the economics field and the behavioural scientist field. I think the thing that excites me is when I come across someone who's really passionate about what they do, really engaged in their subject matter, if it's something really specific that they're wanting to specialize in, and where they want to make a difference. So where I see sort of those three things like intersecting around the passion and engagement and, the impact that person's making, that really inspires me. And that can be anyone. That could be people at the top of their field who have, got Nobel laureates and all of that, or it could be a graduate who has come into work in our team and just brings a lot of energy to what they want to do, and can really see how they can shape outcomes for society, and do that to achieve the best outcomes in whatever field it is that they're looking to work. So that's what inspires me, where people just bring a heap of energy to something where they want to make a difference.
Yeah, that's a much better answer than I expected with that question, I think, as well. I think it was very hard to choose one person, and I was worried about that one. But I guess keeping it on the lighter side as well, if funding was no barrier, if organizational priorities weren't a barrier, what would be your ideal project? What sort of inspires you as well?
Yeah, the project that's been on my mind that I would love to do and love to see implemented and funded would be some sort of model where we're looking at the integrated delivery of health and community services in a community or place-based setting. At a relatively large scale, where you would sit alongside that project for a period of time, examining the fundamental elements of how that might be set up, how you engage and co-design something like that with community and understand their needs and how they want to be engaged through the implementation of a project of that nature. Right, so to sort of how do you successfully deliver on those outcomes? What does that look like from a health perspective, a community services perspective, from a community development perspective? So it's a big project that would go for a really long time, where the economists and behavioural scientists and data analysts would sort of sit alongside the implementation team to support them in understanding what's working, what's not, how we might pivot, and then setting up the collection of that data on a long-term basis to sort of really understand how something like an integrated health and community services precinct, infrastructure, whatever it might look like, it could be a multitude of ways in which it may be delivered, might successfully support improved outcomes within communities. So that's something that's sort of always been tinkering away in the back of my mind, which if there was a project like that, I'd get excited about it.
That's great. And I guess sort of coming to the end of the interview, I'm curious, after hearing all of your thoughts, what your vision is for the future of economics, and where would you like to see it go, especially with the new cohort coming in?
Yeah, I think like with sort of the theme of what we've talked about through this interview, I'd like to see economics and also economists be more open about interdisciplinary collaborations, and bring that open mindset to thinking about different frames of approaching problems, and being more receptive to a whole of solution approach, because I think not one discipline can really now say that we've got the answer, just follow us, we're the economists, we know what we're talking about. We really do need to be not just and I'll say it this way, not just working along the different disciplines, but also working alongside the communities in which these things are being implemented as well. They bring much more knowledge around what works for them, and how they'll respond to certain interventions. And so, we need to also be open to that and, come down out of our ivory tower sometimes and get in the grassroots.
Yeah, well, that's fantastic. And I guess my last question for you, and you've kind of, I'd say you've probably answered this a few times, but I'll ask it anyway, just in case you have a different response. If you could give one piece of advice to students studying any form of behavioural sciences, what would that be?
Can I do three?
Yeah, please do three.
I read three little pieces of advice I'd give people. Bring passion to everything you do. Be open to new ideas and new ways of thinking, and always find the learning in every experience. Not everything will always go right, but there's always something to learn in every experience that you have. So they'd be my three pieces of advice.
Yeah, well, that's fantastic. Thank you so much for sitting down with me today and giving me your thoughts on economics and the future of behavioural insights.
No worries, Sam. Great to chat.
Yeah, you too.